Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Smith, along with my colleagues Ray Gladkowski and Travis Brandt, all of us from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. We've put together a presentation today on how having the CHMM credential for all three of us has helped us do our job and open the doors and allowed us to get into places where we weren't necessarily going to be otherwise. Just a brief outline of what we're going to be discussing today. We'll talk about the setting, what is Mayo Clinic, the folks involved, what the need was, how we came to find out this need, and how the CHMMs came to the rescue, literally. What we did to prepare for the program that we instituted, how we implemented it. We'll talk about some of the benefits that we gained from it and our employer gained from it, the lessons we learned, a little bit about the future, and then we'll have some time. We'll all three be available for your questions. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ray.
Alrighty, I'm going to be talking about the setting. So where are we at? We're at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. We work in the facilities management department here, and we take care of the outpatient clinics, the hospitals, the laboratories. There's tons of different kind of multiple specialized shops here at the Mayo Clinic. Everything from like plumbing shops to paint shops, pipe fitters. There's a huge amount of on-site shops that we have here and that we have to service. We have about 1,150 staff here in facilities management that we want to service and to train. So the cast. So who do we have in this whole training that we put together for the cast? It's the maintenance personnel, we have supervisors, and we have us, the CHMMs. The really cool thing is we're not all the same positions. We have 3 different positions here where the CHMM applies. And it's in our job description where we have to have a CHMM certification to work in our position. So what was their need? The need is there's a lot of variety of chemicals that are used here at the Mayo Clinic within these facilities departments and all the shops. We found that there's training gaps and the disposal gaps of how to get rid of your waste that you have of these chemicals. So what do? We fill the gaps, of course. That's what we do. The maintenance staff, they use a large variety of chemicals, how I said. Anything could be as cleaners, oils, different type of refrigerants that they may have, degreasers and aerosols. We also found that some of the staff, they were unaware of the certain hazards that these chemicals have, whether they could be flammables, corrosives, toxics, reactives. As you see, a lot of the degreasers, they're really corrosive. We'll go through some of how we dealt with the spill cleanup a little later on, where Travis will be talking about that. So we also thought about some of the needs about having the employees have like a basic company required training for the use of these hazardous materials and especially the cleanup. The training that's available, it's not specific for the users. So like your plumbing shops, they don't have a plumbing shop training for the chemicals that they use, or how they have to deal with the cleanups. It doesn't really cover the incidental spills. And incidental spills, we talked about anything between a quart to a liter-ish. So, just small spills, nothing like monstrous or where we'd have to call, the spill cleanup team or the duty officer. And then again, the disposal of the spill cleanup. Most of the spills, or some of the spills, excuse me, are still considered a hazardous waste. So we have to treat them that way. We can't just throw them in the regular trash. They can't be landfilled or, to specialized waste that we're not supposed to throw in the landfill or just throw in your regular garbage. Again, this is it could be different for your state, local, or federal regulations, but it needs to be disposed properly. So here we are, the CHMMs to the rescue. People were wondering, what are we going to do with all these gaps? But there's Travis on the left, that's me, Ray in the middle, and Greg Smith to the right, and we're here. We're here to help and to rescue the needs that were out there for the shops. So how does the CHM actually open the door? This took us a little bit to think about on how we can use our or leverage our CHMM to help out these shops. Being a CHMM, the compliance manager, that's Greg Smith, he recognized the need using his background. He had a strong background with hazardous materials. He found that the staff needs to be formally trained. They need to be trained in the chemical awareness, the chemicals that they're using on a regular basis, like in your plumbing shop or paint shop. Incidental spill response. What do I do when I have a spill? What happens if this material gets all over the place? What do I need to do with it? And then after the cleanup, the disposal of the spill materials. Greg noticed that the staff needs to know these three main objectives to be formally trained. So Greg networked with all the other CHMMs, which is Travis and myself. And it's pretty neat that facilities department has 3 CHMMs. It's not seen everywhere where you have that many certified hazardous material managers. So we're really blessed to have that here at the clinic. So why would someone network with other CHMMs? What's the benefit? Do we just all get into a room and fight? No. We've got the training and experience. We know that that we can be accountable to one another. We're certified hazardous material managers. That's what we're held to. We're all HAZWOPER trained, and over 60 years of combined experience in the hazardous waste field and radioactive waste field. It's pretty neat to see that where we have a collaboration together where it's not just one over the other. We have the training, experience, and credentials to fill these gaps that were noticed earlier. Also, we're very competent in the laws and regulations of hazardous materials. Being a CHMM, you kind of have to be, right? It also demonstrates a high standard of regulatory compliance to the clinic or to your facility. And it shows that credibility that we have that and that they are committed to public safety and to the environment. This is shown even to the regulators. If they see that that your department has this many CHMMs, or we look at the certifications, they're going to show that we're committed to these to the environment and to the public safety. So. All right, my slide deck is getting a little choppy there, but here we go. Slide 12. Here we go. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. We're also a very academic environment here at the Mayo Clinic. The Credential added credibility to us through the eyes of management. When our upper management sees that we're bringing up issues to fill the gaps into these departments, they know that we're not just creating headaches for everybody. There's a need. It needs to be met. Also, they saw that the CHMM credential, it was added to our job descriptions. This is something that they fought for a while previous to my employment, to have it notified that, hey, this matters. The Certified Hazardous Materials Management or Manager certification matters. You have to be that to deal with the kind of hazardous and radioactive waste that we deal with. And then after that, management they're more than willing to listen and show the support. And how I mentioned earlier, it really does send a signal to the regulatory agencies having a CHMM. It shows that our employer has the highest commitment to regulatory compliance. Again, we want to show the integrity. That's why I like this little word graph here that shows that it's all about all of these things. You know, we don't want to have violations. We want to be full of integrity in our record keeping and all of the forms that we have to submit to our regulatory agencies, and that having a very academic environment that supports you really helps. So after this, I'd like to shoot it over to Travis Brandt, who is also a CHMM, that he'll be talking more about, you know, since we all have the CHMM, what did we do? How do we prepare for it? So here he goes.
In preparing any sort of complex issues, we always have to, start with something. In each shop user group, we had an online inventory that the chemicals they were using at the time. So what we were able to do was we combined all the shop's inventories into a large spreadsheet. That gave us a easy way to sort them by various factors, whether we sort them by the shops, the individual chemicals, maybe group them by the classifications, so we can kind of manipulate the data as we see it or we needed to. It also allowed us to evaluate a chemical only once. If there's a typical cleaner that multiple shops in multiple areas used, we wouldn't have to do it multiple times. We would have one time and evaluate it and be able to properly handle it. It also created consistency throughout the inventory. With our 3 CHMMs, we were able to handle the chemicals and evaluate them, and if we would have questions, we would go amongst each other and, Ray, what do you think of classifying it this way? Greg, how do you feel about classifying this way? So we networked amongst each other to make sure we had a consistency through all the inventory chemicals. And it also added value as in when we were evaluating all the chemicals, the material hazards were identified and clearly described. You had a cleaner, it's corrosive, it's going to burn, and it's going to hurt. Flammable materials are flammable. Let's put them in the correct storage. Make sure compatibility conditions are given or are met. Proper PPE. If you're dealing with a corrosive, you want to make sure you have gloves on and the proper goggles or eyewear, maybe some protective clothing, whatever would minimize the hazards associated with that chemical. And again, spill response. If there is a certain amount of spill, and we're mainly dealing with incidental spills, on the smaller side, where things happen, we would be able to clean it up. You look at our spec sheet and use the information that we needed to determine, okay, we need a dustpan and a mop. It's a solid on the ground, just be careful with it. Or if it's a liquid, use a corrective spill pad associated with it. And then once everything is all cleaned up, what do you actually do with it? Can I throw it in the garbage? Can I not? Do I give it to hazardous radioactive waste? What do I do with it? So that spec sheet helped out a lot of how to determine what to deal with it. Implementation. We actually went to a lot of the shops. We prepared a core training presentation, but we also kind of modified for each shop, because there's a shop that deals with paint. They're not going to care about plumbing supplies. If that way, you could focus on the chemicals that they handle at any given day. We also provided a custom spreadsheet for each shop, and this is the spec sheet I have been referencing. It's a big spreadsheet with a lot of data, and we were able to divide it amongst each shop again and give it to the shop of paint guys. They'll be able to know how they handle all their paint chemicals. Give it to the plumbing shop. They know how to use their plumbing chemicals, and so on and so forth. And we would also give them time for Q&As because, they have questions. And hopefully we have answers. And this is the fact sheet we like to reference. It's the spill action sheet. This is a snippet of it. And as you can see, we have the chemicals on the left-hand side with our special HMMIS numbers. And that's a male thing. And we also determine, is it hazardous? Is it not hazardous? And if it is hazardous, what's the hazard associated with it? Again, is it flammable? Is it corrosive? Is it a gas? Things that we should be worrying about if something were to happen with it. How is it stored? Can I just store it on a countertop somewhere? Or should I keep it in a flammable cabinet? It is flammable, especially if it's flammable. These simple regulatory measures that might not be thought of by, I've been handling this for years, never thought about it. Is it an aerosol? A simple thing is aerosols, they should be always stored in our flam cabinets. Just if it were the puncture, that would be, disastrous. And then the next couple of columns deal with the PPE side of it. Should be working with work gloves or leather gloves. Should we have nitrile gloves associated with it? Safety glasses, goggles, face shield, a Tyvek suit, or rubber apron. Simple things that, again, get overlooked as you're working more and more with these chemicals every day. And we just want to reiterate with people and show them this is what we should be handling it with. That way they can look at this and be able to say, oh, I've got some sodium bicarbonate. Okay, it's a not hazardous substance. It can be stored on a shelf. It's not an aerosol. And I can use work gloves and safety glasses. There's not a whole lot of hazards associated with that. As compared to the chrome R tile. It's a hazard. It's got a corrosive liquid associated with it. Again, shelf below eye level. It's not considered an aerosol, but you should be wearing nitrile gloves and goggles. Again, it's a corrosive liquid. You want to try and protect your body from it. Incidental quantity and maximum quantity kind of refers to if it were to happen if we were to spill something. So again, the chrome R tile. If you spill about a pint of it, you should be able to clean it up by yourself. The maximum quantity is 2 gallons of it again. Then you start involving other people. We have a spill team that we have on site here that we would contact, and they would be able to assist in something on a larger scale. And these were just kind of determined throughout the process of a normal person should be able to handle 2 gallons with our PPE and spill pads that we provide to each location. On the lower side of this, we can kind of see what are we going to use to actually clean up the material. So the first 4 columns are for the different types of spill pads or spill containment that we would use. So for example, if we had absorbents, solvent absorbents, we would use those for flammable materials. Acid neutralizers are going to be for acid compatible materials. whereas alkaline neutralizers are going to be for alkaline materials. Combustible absorbents would be more for combustible or for non-regulated materials. And if it's not hazardous and you can clean it up with a simple paper towel or mop and bucket, we have that alternative as well. And then finally we have it, what do you do with it when you finally clean it up? Well, is it hazardous waste? If it is, we need to make sure that it's disposed of properly. We would have a slip that we fill out with the containment or the contaminated material, and we would send it to the appropriate place. For trash, simple trash would do. Sanitary sewer, some of the stuff can even go right down the sewer. Again, we're not dealing with monstrous amounts of material, but there are some cases where you can safely sanitary sewer it. And there are even some things that we could recycle or reclaim. A lot of these are gas cylinders in this case, where you can take the cylinder and give it right back to the manufacturer. And with that, I'm going to give it back to Greg Smith so he can talk about some benefits.
Well, thanks, Travis. This is Greg back. So what were the big benefits from this? We spent a lot of time putting this program together and taking it out to the shops, trying to help them out. What were the benefits? Well, for one, the supervisors were just tickled pink to have somebody come in and do a little extra training for their shops. They welcomed it. Here at Mayo, the supervisor is responsible for doing all the training for their employees, and having somebody from outside their immediate shop come in and help them with training, they loved it. And I will note that we have not completed all of the shops yet because COVID got us a little behind, and we're working on that almost on a daily basis now. So this training program also provided the information that they actually needed. As Travis had alluded earlier, the folks in the paint shop really don't care too much about the plumbing supplies. They want to know, what do we do with the painting supplies? How do we handle that? What are the hazards that we have to deal with? So as a result, the employees said, hey, somebody cares. They're in here trying to help us out. They felt like they were valued. And then this sheet that we left with them gave them a quick reference. The supervisors have said, hey, I'm going to post that up in the shop for everybody to see. And I said, yes, that's exactly what I want you to do with it, so that all the information is there and they can look at it anytime they need it. The workers also got to see somebody who can answer their questions about the hazardous materials. Admittingly, our supervisors are not anywhere as close to hazardous materials experts. They've been working with them for many years when they were a frontline worker and now as supervisors, but they don't have the insight. So we as CHMMs were able to provide the workers with a little more insight on what those hazardous materials do. We also got some other nice benefits out of it. Caused the supervisors to step back and go, do I really need to have all these things? So it'll reduce some of the chemicals that we have. Or, well, gee, I didn't know somebody else was buying this stuff. I won't have to buy the brand I was doing before, because we did have some situations where we'd have different brands of the same material. So we just reduced our count of items. And we've also reduced volume in some cases. You get a situation where, well, I needed to keep 5 gallons of this on hand, but if the shop over there also has a couple of gallons, I don't have to keep so much on hand in case there would be an issue. And in my view, probably one of the most important aspects of it is that we were able to identify those things that need some special storage. And that's the items that need to go in flammable cabinets and in some cases an acid cabinet, and or need to be stored separately. Let's put it this way. we've had a few flammable cabinets ordered by the shops since we started this process, and a much better segregation and separation of acids and bases and other things that are not compatible. We also then have folks now having a little more simplified spill cleanup process, and we've given them some numbers to work with. What kind of quantity should they be playing with? Now, Travis showed in the copy of the spreadsheet that okay, use an acid absorbent or a base neutralizer or a solvent absorbent. Well, really and truly, Travis, through his diligent work, found some spill pads that we can use that just soak up about anything. Some that will reject water and others that reject oil. So what we've been able to do is basically say, okay, shops, here's 2 pads that you can get a hold of, and that will cover your cleanup for just about everything, at least for absorbing liquids. And it's given them some consistency. If the folks in this shop need to wear gloves and glasses to handle a certain material, then the folks in the next shop also need to wear gloves and glasses to handle that same material. Similarly with the storage and spills and disposal. It's amazingly, not all of the shops realize that some things would remain hazardous after use and would need to be handled as hazardous waste. We have that under control now. One of the things in our lessons learned that really came out was SDSs. Anytime that you want to know something about a hazardous material, everybody says, well, go to the SDS. And they're great. They are absolutely fantastic documents. And when I was in hazardous waste, that was something that we would use quite a bit to help us in our process to evaluate materials for disposal purposes. But I always told folks it's a good start, but it doesn't have all the answers. So when you're using an SDS, you need to be familiar with them, understand what they're saying. Yes, they have a nice standardized format these days, but occasionally they'll throw you a curveball. And as I was going through there, looking at things, I was going through and I came across compressed air that one of our shops had. Okay, well, we'll go through and I'll look at the SDS, see what it says. What? Yeah. In case of an accidental release, to evacuate the area and assure adequate air ventilation, wear self-contained breathing apparatus when entering the area unless atmosphere is proven to be safe. Stop leak if safe to do so. So I went back, stepped back, scratched my head and said, so, what's that telling me? It's telling me that if I have a container of compressed air leaking, that I'm to put on a container of compressed air and use that to breathe to go in to look at the container of compressed air. Doesn't always add up. Now, we can deal with that. We as CHMMs and professionals, we understand where they were going and even can understand the absurdity of the requirement. But you show that to a tradesman who may be relatively new to the area, and he sees that the SDS says that it's just absolutely crazy in their mind, the SDS loses a lot of credibility. Even though it's usually full of really good information, when they see something like that, they kind of start to lose confidence in that SDS. So they're not always enough. It's really good to have somebody behind them. So where's this going in the future? Well, we want to maintain these relationships that we've established with the workers. And now, in and that's going to be even more interesting in that some of us are working from home. Of the three of us CHMMs, I am working from home almost full time at this point, and only going in once every week or two. We need to also find a way to maintain these inventories, which is normally the job of the supervisor, and I believe it should stay that way, but we need to be able to help them fully evaluate any new products that they bring on board. So we're working on ways to figure out how to make that happen. So just a few things that I want to say about the whole process here. As a CHMM, we were able to utilize the resources that we had available and help out our workers and our supervisors. So we want to stay in touch with them during this or throughout this whole process and into the future. Let them know that we are, and never fail to remind the supervisor when we're talking with them, hey, we're here for you anytime you need some assistance with some training about handling hazardous materials. We want to help you out. We want to help you get the right answer. Last thing we ever want to see is somebody get hurt because they were improperly using a material or hazardous material. That would just be bad on so many levels. So now we're going to cut to a Q&A session, and the three of us will be live for this Q&A session. And I thank you all for your attention and hope that you were able to learn something from this today. Thank you. The end.